Soul's Freedom and Salvation, December 26, 2018. Dr. Nikhil asked, was John the Baptist fully reformed and saved? Dr. Nikhil asked, you had mentioned in the previous discourse that John the Baptist was like good fertile soil with good seeds, but he could not hear the preaching of Jesus. You also said that this John had received the rain of God's grace in his generation and was already saved. That is why he was able to recognize Jesus as a human incarnation of God. I am confused whether these statements refer to John the Baptist or John the disciple. If they refer to John the disciple, there is no problem, but if they refer to John the Baptist, then there is a contradiction. Before Jesus arrived, how can it be said that the Baptist had received the grace of God? The grace of God is basically the divine knowledge preached by the Incarnation. But the Baptist never learned divine knowledge from Jesus. Then naturally, it's not possible that the Baptist was saved. If the Baptist was already saved, he must be fully reformed. If he was fully reformed, how could there be an uncancelled pending punishment for him? The Baptist was not an incarnation to bear the suffering of devotees upon himself like Jesus. This means that his death sentence must have been the punishment for his own sin. It means that he was not fully reformed and saved. Swami replied, John, the baptizer of Jesus, was another contemporary human incarnation. It is like sage Vyasa, who was another human incarnation along with Krishna. The births of all these human incarnations were miraculous. Sage Vyasa was born directly as a grown-up boy as soon as sage Parashara met with Satyavati, the unmarried mother of Vyasa. John was born to a very old barren lady, and Jesus was born to an unmarried girl. While Krishna was born, Lord Vishnu, the energetic incarnation, appeared before his parents. After the birth of both Krishna and Jesus, wicked kings in their respective places and times killed several children in search of birth. Both Krishna and Jesus did several miracles. Both preached wonderful spiritual knowledge in the form of the Gita and the Bible respectively. When John was to be born, a divine angel told his father that God is sending his messenger to preach about the concept of reformation of the soul. Baptism was the external symbol of this reformation. Like sage Vyasa, John also lived in a remote forest. John was very bold due to his strong faith in God, and so he criticized a king for committing the sin of unlawful sex. John's idea was that the king should repent and withdraw from the sin. For his bold criticism, he was imprisoned by the king. The king was actually not willing to behead him, since he had recognized him to be a divine messenger. But the king was trapped by negative influences which forced him to commit such a horrible sin of killing a divine preacher. Even in the case of Jesus, the Roman officer before whom the trial of Jesus was conducted could not find any fault with Jesus, but he was trapped in the plot of the priests of the temple and was forced to order the crucifixion. As Jesus suffered the sins of his devotees through the crucifixion, John also suffered the sins of his devotees through his horrible punishment. Every divine messenger is an incarnation of God. The difference between actual incarnations like Krishna, Jesus and so on, and divine messengers like Vyasa, Madhva, John and so on is very small. In the case of the incarnation, God actually merges with the soul, whereas in the case of the divine messenger, he remains very closely associated with the soul. Shankara and Jesus declared that they are God. Shankara said, Shiva Kevaloham. Jesus said, I am the truth and the light. It was the God who had merged into them who spoke those words through them. The human being components in the incarnations did not want to speak such words. No devoted soul, be it the soul in an incarnation or a messenger, aspires for monism with God. God himself merges with the specific soul and speaks about his identity, suppressing the desire of the devoted soul acting as his medium. Balarama was an incarnation of Adishesha, who is a very close servant of God. But he is considered as one of the 10 incarnations of God. It is like an honorary degree granted to a person or a conferred IAS officer. There is not the slightest difference between a messenger of God, a son of God, and an incarnation of God. The three represent the dualism of Madhva, the special monism of Ramanuja, and the perfect monism of Shankara, respectively. In fact, the incarnation of God himself expresses each of these three states based on the extent of ego and jealousy of his disciples. If the disciples have very high ego and jealousy, the incarnation says that he is only a messenger of God. If the disciples' ego and jealousy is moderate, he says that he is the son of God. If the ego and jealousy of the disciples is negligibly small, he reveals his oneness with God. Even the divine messenger saves his disciples by undergoing the punishment for their sins. The incarnation is a homogeneous mixture of God and soul, like an alloy of gold and copper. The messenger is a copper rod welded with a golden rod. In both cases, if the gold is heated, the copper also becomes hot. In both cases, the human being component suffers by the will of God. God, who is represented by gold in the analogy, is invisible and in fact unimaginable. So the heating of the invisible gold can only be expressed through the heating of the visible copper. In other words, we cannot see the unimaginable God, but upon witnessing the suffering of the human component of the incarnation, we realize the fact that God suffers for the sins of his devotees. Here it is very important to note that God suffers for the sins of only his real devotees. He does not suffer for the sins of all humanity. Emmanuel is the one who suffers for the sins of only his real devotees.